Starting. Hey, everyone. We're on the air. And we are joined today by Kevin Allen of USA Today, which is great news because we have so much to talk about. And let's just jump right into the show today, shall we? Here we go. Today, hello. Try again. Okay.
Professional.
I'm not good with cold starts. Hello, Hockey World. It's Friday, June 16th, 2017.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com, the podcast that you know a trade will break the second we log off. So, I mean, literally, yesterday, I don't think it could have happened any closer to us cutting off the air.
It was 3 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I was walking from my office to my car, and I get a text about it, and it's just like, so it happened. We discussed this possibility of Duran being traded to Montreal for this guy before. We all thought, no, that's kind of too much to give up to Duran. But before we go any further, let's hear Kevin Allen's thought on this, because, Kevin, what are your thoughts on this deal?
Well, I thought it really was, it sounds like it's a cop-out, but it's true. I mean, it's a trade that I think helped because it gave them exactly what they needed. The Montreal Canadiens need more of a scoring punch. They get a guy who has a defined scoring touch. We can say that it's at least 1 year's worth of proven. He was a 20-goal scorer. He has a dynamic presence about him. He can make things happen. He's exciting. He'll put a charge into the offense. He's probably has an instant love fest going with the fans of Montreal. I know they're thrilled by it. I can read Twitter. Now, on the other hand, from the Lightning's perspective, as I wrote, I'm reasonably confident that Steve Yzerman has some regret over not taking Seth Jones when he did. And the reason he does is not that Drouin is not an excellent hockey player, because he is, but he's been desperately looking for a top four defenseman, for months to find one, because it's really, I don't want to say impossible, but difficult, challenging to trade for one. So basically, he's got a do-over. He's been able to go back and get a defenseman, Mikhail, now I'm drawing a blank. Help me out. Sergachev, who is a 6'3" puck-moving defenseman, to be a good defensive player as well. He finally has the guy. Now, the only concern was Russ Cohen can testify that scouting is an inexact science. Everybody thinks that Sergachev is going to be a elite level defenseman, but they don't know that for sure. Where Drouin is already a little more well established. So from that perspective, I guess we can say Montreal got the more proven player. But I really like this trade from both. Frank, I was surprised that the Lightning got a second-round pick out of the deal as well, because it's pretty well thought of. I mean, Russ can speak to it better than I can, but I've talked to scouts about him, over the last year, and everybody seems to think he's the real deal.
Russ, go ahead.
Yeah, he is the real deal. From what I heard on the radio, Kev, is that he's got to play 40 games. If he plays 40 games, it's not a second. So it's not really a second. That's right. Just a little insurance.
Right. The draft picks drop off completely if he goes 40 games, then it's 1-for-1.
Right. So we're not even worried about that. From the Sergachev point of view, yeah, I love the guy's size. He has a physical ability. He's a leader on the ice. He has definitely cut down on the mistakes that he would make with the puck offensively. He has a great shot. So he really could be exactly like Ryan McDonough was when Montreal traded him. Now, on the Drouin side, the thing that I don't like is what I'm hearing, that they may go back and try and turn him into a center if they don't make a trade for a center. I really hope that doesn't happen. I understand he played some center in Halifax. It's different than the NHL. I would not be in favor of that. If he's going to be a winger, he could definitely be a 70-point winger in the NHL, but he's not going to be a 70-point center. And so that's the part of the trade that I'm worried about if Montreal is going to force this issue, if they can't make that next deal And I'm hearing a little bit more and more that is a possibility. So it's good for both sides.
Yeah.
Now, Sergachev, and look, is he exactly ready? He might be, but it really depends on who you pair with.
And see that
somebody will be important.
And you know, if it's possible to like and respect Drouin and think Drouin is, you know, at least a very good forward and maybe potentially a star, and still think Montreal screwed up here, that's me. Because honestly, I look at this trade and they gave up their best defensive prospect with a defense that you have Emelin over 30, Petrie at 30, Markov 37 or 38 years old, Weber at 32. So you have an older defense. You do have a first-round pick prospect in Noah Juleson who's coming along but might not be ready next year. Their defense is old, and this guy was probably going to be on their blue line for a decade at least. So they gave up that, and they didn't address the area that team has needed to address for years, which is up the middle. And if they're going to convert Drouin to center when he probably is a winger, that's just stupidity. So, I mean, if this is probably move one in a number of moves that Bergevin's going to make, and if he goes out and gets a center, okay, fine. But if they stand as they are right now, this is just dumb.
I don't agree with that at all.
I don't either. That's ludicrous.
That's really rough. Because to me, like at this point, you know, I think that you've got two question marks to a degree. I mean, both of these guys are a bit of a question mark. You can say Jordan less of a question mark, but why was Tampa so willing to trade him is my question. You know, like, so
money.
Tampa seemed okay trading him, and I know they needed.
It is money.
It's money, but okay. So, but if he's really the star that Montreal wants him to be, and Montreal gave him money, so you know, therefore he's that. You know, there's question marks on both sides here, and you know.
Well, but all right, but here let's get down to brass tacks with Tampa. Tampa was also willing to get rid of him because the coach likes Tyler Johnson better, Killorn better. There's certain guys that this coach likes better than Jonathan Drouin. There's no secret about that. That's another reason why they were willing to trade him.
All right.
But, I mean, you're back to the primary reason to get the defenseman. Like this,
yes,
like they weren't giving away.
Right.
That's like, it's not like, let's get rid of Drouin and make the best possible deal. They've been trying to find a defenseman. They couldn't get a veteran guy. The best, maybe not the best, defenseman. So that's first and foremost. But I think wherever Drouin ends up, I think he's going to be a top flight player. You know,
And I'll say this too. I'm really happy
to center. That's all. That's my issue.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's fair. But I'm really happy that the NHL trading is cool again. Throw that out there. Like we have, like last year we had Subban, Weber, Paul, Larson. You know, now you've got Drouin, and trading is cool again. You know, like there was many years there where we never saw a trade like this.
But this is the problem, Mac. Right now, the Habs' number one defenseman number one center is Tomas Plekanec. That's the problem.
That's right now. That's right now, Mike. Right. And you have to. They weren't going to get. I mean, you have to. Sometimes you can't trade for what's not available to you, right? Drouin was available to them, so they went out and they got him. That they added scoring. They added a French Canadian on top of it, which is a bigger deal than people, let on.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. But what I'm saying is, you've used your number one bargaining chip in Sergachev. Your task was to go out and get as good of a center as you possibly can. And they didn't do that. Now, Drouin is great, but I compare this sort of like the deal that the Leafs made for Phil Kessel a few years ago. They needed a number one center, and they got a number one winger. Great, but who's going to feed him the puck? Well, that's the problem.
I hope that happens. The other part of this deal that I found humorous was listening to the Montreal media. They believe that Petrie is like a number 3 defenseman, like a top 3, and I don't believe that. So I think they're going with that. Now, Juleson is going to be a terrific defenseman, but he did have injury problems, slight ones, and so he's going to start the year at Laval and he'll probably play the whole year there, and it wouldn't shock me if he needs another year there. But he's really good, and he has a really good shot. I think he's just a little lesser than what Sergachev will be. So they do have somebody in the ranks, so I can't kill him. They didn't, get rid of the only offensive defenseman they had. That's fine. But, again, just keep Drouin as a winger, and then you'll see his points increase. If you put him at center, I can't see his points increasing.
Right. No, I think that's fair. I think that's true. And they still could go get Derek Stepan for Galchenyuk.
Absolutely.
That could still happen.
They can.
Yeah. And I think that's in the realm of possibility. I think that they will try to get a center. And, the other thing I would point out is I saw the Nashville Predators go 2-2 with the Penguins with Colton Sissons and Mike Fisher as their top.
Yeah, it's true.
And against Crosby and Malkin. Now,
Yeah.
I think that sort of actually feeds into Mike's point about the defense, because they were able to do that because they had a defense.
Exactly.
That was Roman Josi and Ryan Ellis and Nick Holm
Although to Fisher's credit, he was winning a lot of faceoffs. He really did great.
Oh, he played really, really well, and Colton Sissons played
played well too. He did.
No, they rode the wave, and the emotional wave that people ride when you go to the Stanley Cup final, and
I just hope that this is the start of some trades. I mean, to be honest, I really expected more by now with all the jockeying going on. I guess maybe what it tells us is that a lot of teams have made with Vegas not to take certain players. Otherwise, they're is Minnesota going to really let Vegas take Brodin, or are they going to trade him? I would assume they would trade him. So
there's I'll talk to some of my rumors. You can debunk them or what have you.
We have until midnight tonight, right before the freeze tomorrow.
No, 3 p.m. tomorrow.
Oh, 3 p.m. tomorrow. So there still could be some last minute action.
Somebody in Minnesota who's a really good source of mine, and they said they feel like they're getting as many calls on Brodin as Vegas is probably getting. They said they're really getting. So I think Brodin is a good chance. I do think there's a good chance that Brodin will get dealt. They're getting good offers. And the one, I've heard Galchenyuk for Brodin, and that's something that I've heard, which is I think that that's a possible deal there. That makes sense. And then one other one I heard today, which was really interesting, because this comes from a very, very good source of mine, who I only hear from usually when something is pretty darn close to happening, was Landeskog for Cody Ceci. And the concept of, Colorado moving Landeskog to Ottawa for Cody Ceci. That's
a good trade. I think that's a really well-balanced trade, actually. One more thing, Eck, about Montreal. I did hear one reporter, and I think the media now is sort of like, well, we made our trade, let's get rid of Galchenyuk. And it's like, be careful with with the guy you want to get rid of there, because this kid is loaded with talent. Just because he hasn't produced the way you wanted him to, even though, like I said, 2 years ago, he had the worst 30 goals in hockey. He did, because they ripped him every day for it. This kid can play, and I'm sure, Bergevin's not going to make a bad trade, but it's almost like if the media could trade Galchenyuk, they would make a bad trade for him, which is crazy. It's like they sour on players way too early there.
I don't think it's a slam dunk that they'll trade him. I think that.
No, I don't either.
I think easily.
Yeah, I will tell you this. I think other teams realize what you're saying, Russ, is true. I don't think he's lost his shine around the league. I think a lot of people look at Galchenyuk as he was with a coach that didn't like him. Then a new coach came in, and then you had a situation. So I think they still see him as the way a lot of people see Drouin. It's similar, and they're very similar in that way. There is a funny thing I wanted to show you that this was really funny.
While you're pulling that up, let me just say this. It's like the opinion of Galchenyuk would have maybe been off base if they hadn't come if Claude Julien had not come in, given him a chance at center, and then moved him back to the wing and then used him on the fourth line of the playoffs. That's the reason why there's so much heat to a Galchenyuk trade, is because Julien appears to have agreed with what Therrien had believed over the last couple of years. So I think that's the reason why his name is going to continue to be out there, and he probably will be moved.
Yeah, so someone sent me this. This is really a shame. This guy wrote yesterday, 11:35 a.m. Got a Jonathan Drouin jersey day for my birthday. How about that? Really excited. Anyway.
Well, okay. And
bad luck for you. Just throwing that out there.
And Drouin was wearing number 72 at the press conference but if Galchenyuk gets traded, I have a feeling that jersey, those two numbers will be flipped pretty quickly.
Right, that's the other thing. You got to trade Galchenyuk to give Drouin his number back. But let's talk about the possibility of Landeskog for Ceci. I mean, we've talked about Ceci as a tough one for them to keep, because the defensive situation that they're going on, they're in a similar situation to Minnesota, right? So they've got either, we talked about Ceci, we talked about them losing who was the other? Right.
That is who they're going to lose, yeah.
Right. So
unless they trade Phaneuf.
right? Unless they trade for enough, which is possible. But
Yeah.
what would you think of this trade, Kev? What would you think of that concept?
Well, that's the first I've heard about it. There are two guys both could help the teams they would be going to. That's an interesting trade. And I think it would help Ottawa's situation. And certainly the Avalanche have to start rebuilding somewhere, and the defense is where they want it. He's not the, kind of the puck moving guy that they were hoping to get. They were hoping to get a real, number one defenseman, and he's not that.
Right.
So.
No, he's not that, but he's, and Landeskog, it's evaluating Landeskog a little bit. Perhaps there's a draft pick thrown in there or something like that, to kind of bounce out. I think they're getting a little bit more.
Well, you have to factor in that Landeskog has got the long-term contract, and he's making over $5 million a year. I think for another 4 years. CC is
the evil sound man coming in from somewhere.
Yeah, that's really wild. CC is 1 year away from needing a new contract. He's making less than 3. He's probably going to be asking in the 4 to 5 range. And I mean, that's wow. What is that?
Mike, you're gonna have to log out, I think.
All right, I'll log out and see if that's.
You're on the Darth Vader modulator.
Yeah, you got something odd going on.
I'll say this about CC. I think CC at 23 still isn't what he's going to be. I think he is still looking for that exact role in the league. He definitely can move the puck, but like Kev said, he's not an elite puck mover, but he has a physical game. He has good size. He'll get you 30, 35 points. And it's a good trade if they can balance the money. Yeah, CC will look to get like $4.5 million, and I'd be okay with that. Landeskog probably needs to change.
Kevin, do me a favor and log out for a second yourself, if you could. And log in. I can invite you back again or something.
Well, okay. Let me just say this. I think if all things being equal, the Pierre Dorian does not want to trade Cody Ceci. He would rather trade Dion Phaneuf, because Dion Phaneuf is 32 years old. He's got 4 years left in his contract. He's being paid $7 million a year. He's going to be in the next year or so on the decline. So, I mean, he wants to keep Ceci because he's 23 years old, I believe. They have Thomas Chabot, who's probably a top 4 defenseman in the next couple of years. They'll probably want to move him in slowly, but he's got that kind of ability. Excuse me. I would think that they would move heaven and earth to trade Phaneuf. And that I know Pierre LeBrun mentioned this morning that there are a number of teams interested in Phaneuf, but more than likely Ottawa's going to have to retain salary to get to move Phaneuf. And that just illustrates the feat of magic that Lou Lamoriello performed a little over a year ago in getting Ottawa to take Dion Phaneuf and not retaining any of the money. So Ottawa now has to do it.
Here's the problem with Ottawa. They draft too well. And because they draft too well and aren't one of the top spending teams, they're going to have this problem every 2 to 3 years. And this is a tough one if you're like a fan of the Senators, because they've got a lot of guys in the system. But when it comes to paying these guys, then all of a sudden trades are made. And then that part's tough. And they're going to identify the guys they feel like they can keep in their core, but their core can't be the same core that, let's say, the New York Rangers have, because they'll spend more money. So that's, even though they're a Canadian team, until that part changes, they're always going to be hindered a little bit. And so, yeah, whatever deal they make, they're not going to get back a lot of money. They just won't. That's not their way.
Well, and I do agree with that we're talking about this trade just because it's an interesting thing. But Colorado is not going to do that trade. I mean, they're going to want more. And I'm assuming.
Yeah, they will want more.
We're just talking about the main pieces of the trade.
Yes.
Yeah, there's another piece involved in this. Like, it would be a second or whatever pick.
Yeah, they would want more, and they would be right to get it. Yeah.
But I think it does. If now will they trade both Landeskog and Duchesne? That's the big question in Colorado.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think they would.
To be honest, I had heard they weren't going to trade Landeskog. So
yeah, I heard that. It seemed like Duchesne was getting closer and closer to being the guy who was getting moved, right? Like that.
But if you think about it logically, Mikko Rantanen could take the role of Gabriel Landeskog, and they wouldn't miss a beat. There is no one to take Matt Duchene's role in that system that's ready to come up. That's the problem.
But Matt Duchene is probably easier to move because he's only got 2 years left in his contract, as opposed to Landeskog being signed for, I think, 4 more years. So,
sure, but I'm just saying, if you want to just talk about replacement,
right,
they got the other guy that's easier to replace with.
But here's another rumor that's coming up, and this was texted to me just now, and we've talked about it before, but it was and they heard what Kevin was saying. They said, don't forget Colorado's interest in Hammond. And Colorado has an interest in Hammond, and the Islanders definitely have an interest in Duchene. There seems like there's a deal there to be made as well that would really fulfill. I mean, that really is more of the kind of guy that Colorado's been looking for.
Yeah, they have a mess with their protection list as well.
Yeah,
they're going to lose somebody significant. Obviously they could be traded, but they pretty much have to go 8 protect if they want to. Oh gosh, it's terrible. The kid that has the big shot.
Ryan Pulock.
Russ, help me out.
Ryan Pulock.
Yep, Ryan Pulock. Ryan Pulock. He's the guy to protect him. You got to leave Calvin DeHaan available, and then you've got some other issues. Brock Nelson, I think, would be left unprotected as well. So they're going to lose somebody of significance. So they may be looking to make trying to open up their roster as well and make a big move. And Duchene makes a lot of sense. I mean, a Tavares Duchene 1-2 combination, that's pretty good. So
yeah, if they could pull that off, that would be pretty good. Here's the problem with the Islanders, though. Snow doesn't do anything quickly, and I could see him running out of time trying to make one of these deals and then losing somebody of significance as a result. Because, like with Hammond, we could talk about him being traded all day long. I still think there's a very low chance that he gets traded because of the value that he is to that team and in Garth's mind. I think that's a problem. I'm going to log out now.
Right, you try. We're all giving our best here. We're like bringing the ship in like 4 at a time. So, all right.
Yeah. Oh.
Here's the next rumor, and this kind of goes along, and this was just said to me as well, that the Canadiens aren't going to tender an offer to Nikita Nesterov. Now Nikita. Now that's not a big deal, but they did just trade another defenseman, right? So Nesterov, who was brought in to give them depth on defense, and they've given another defenseman away. This tends to me to think that Montreal has something else up their sleeve, and they're pulling it.
Well, what it might mean, Eck, is that they're calling off the dogs, so to speak, to trade Nathan Beaulieu, and maybe they're going to keep him now because if you trade Beaulieu on top of trading Sergachev, are you allergic to every defenseman who has a 2 at the beginning of his age? I mean, because that's
right.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to trade him now. I think you're right. I think that part's ended.
Yeah, but Nesterov is not to me, he's a pretty solid.
He's okay. He's a serviceable defenseman. He's got some upside, but not a lot.
6, 7, whatever in there. But he's something that.
Remember, he's like a 7th defenseman who can also jump up and play the wing. He's got that flexibility, but he's not in and of itself. He's not going to make the difference between your defense being great and your defense being poor. He's a body.
Right. Now the teams I've heard involved with are Montreal, which again is another possibility. And that seems like a strange thing for Montreal to do. Edmonton, which is I can see maybe a little bit more than Montreal.
Is this Phaneuf? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. And Washington, which I really just don't understand at all. But those are the teams that I've heard.
And LeBrun reported Los Angeles, and
LeBrun reported Los Angeles.
You got to think of 3 things here. Dion Phaneuf is from Edmonton, his wife is from Montreal, and his wife works in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, there's too many dots there. I'm not worried about that. I think if it's Los Angeles, they'll try and move him for Gabrick, so you have contract for contract. If it's to one of the other teams, Edmonton, like even for Eberle, that's a lot of contract. So I'll be shocked if Ottawa eats money. Just totally shocked.
Yeah. Phaneuf has a lot of value, Kevin?
Who, Phaneuf?
Yeah.
He's got some value, but it's mostly a contract move, to be sure.
Right.
So,
so Gretzky, Hextall came out and said, I love this. It's one of my favorite.
Little difference.
very little difference. Sorry, I'm like looking at three things at once. So Hextall, as you know, having dealt with the Flyers for years, is the hardest general manager that I've ever had to deal with the Flyers by far. Not even close. I mean, the other guys were difficult, but not in this world. He is very secretive and very much like deceptive, and just throws you off the track. You don't know what the hell's going on. So here's his latest quote. I mean, he's a great guy, and obviously, you know, but he just really, really hates me and hates people like me. So when I talk to him, he just won't get anything out of him. So he says that there's, I love this, a 25 to 75% probability of the Flyers making a trade before tomorrow's 3 p.m. deadline.
Okay, big deal.
25 to 75%.
I mean, but again, if the Flyers make a deal, it's not going to be a massive deal. And actually, that's, by the way, that's the Hockey Buzz Frog.
It is Hockey Buzz Frog.
That's who that is.
Or it's all that, or it's that shrimp salad I had for lunch today. Sorry.
But here's an interesting thing. I was going to say, here's an interesting thing. So Jordan Wheel, they have an agreement with him in years, but not in money. And so if he doesn't come to terms, he could end up being the guy that gets dealt because they're not going to give him away for nothing. Like, that may be the cryptic message that Ron Hextall is sending to Jordan Wheel's agent today.
He's pushing it a little bit. Kevin, go ahead.
Or it just could be a trade that he's going to make with Vegas to take some specific player. That's, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, what's the over and under on the number of draft picks and prospects that George McPhee is going to have? Find out about next week. I mean, I've seen people speculate as high as 12 draft picks for the 12 rounds. So, like, the standard currency for all these trades are second and third round picks.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but here's the thing, Kev, something I brought up when you weren't on the show. I think McPhee from like the fourth round on is going to draft a lot of overage guys. Otherwise, he will have trouble filling that AHL roster even as a shared affiliate.
Unless
they sign a bunch of guys.
Unless he picks a lot of players for other teams and flips them for more than one player. I mean, I think there's going to be enough of that where he's going to get bodies from teams, you know, young players that he can populate his AHL team from. Ak, I don't know if you were going to mention this, but I think it's important. Was the news of the buyout of Simone Dupré from Anaheim?
Yeah.
Because first of all, he's 25 years old, so it's not the typical buyout. His buyout is only 1/3 of the remaining cap hit over the last 4 years of the deal. So basically, Anaheim is going to save $3 million a year for the next 4 years on buying him out. Now, there might be some dispute there because he had concussion problems, and all of a sudden he's healthy enough to clear and be bought out. That's the same situation that happened with Jared Cowan last year with the Leafs, and that was under an arbitrator being reviewed by an arbitrator for months. So, but in the short term, they open up cap space that may be enough to sign Cam Fowler to the extension on July 1. And that's even without trading Vatanen. So that might change what Anaheim does in terms of their moves of a defenseman out.
Yeah,
I think what the Anaheim deal is with Vegas is one of the most intriguing things going into next week.
Yes.
Because they have seemed to have no concern over losing anybody of note, and they were looking at, you know, Silverberg versus Josh Manson type balls. Yeah. So, and I've been told, he has confirmed it that I know of, that, you know, that there's no chance that they're not worried about who they're gonna lose anymore. So obviously something has happened.
Will we ever hear about those deals, those side deals?
Yeah, we're gonna hear about them.
I don't know if
the only one we hear about is Kruger. That's the only one that's.
We haven't heard. I mean, we're not. They don't have to release them to us, and they really. I mean, does it really matter? Like, once it's done, said and done, if they said, you know, we did something. I mean, I guess you will. But it's interesting how tomorrow's at 3. We have like a little mini trade deadline tomorrow going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we do, but we won't really know until Sunday.
Right.
Happen, because we'll be we'll have the release of the protected list. That'll be fun to see what that. But we really aren't going to know what's going to happen because we don't know what the deals are.
Right. It may be completely meaningless if we see like Minnesota's protected list and Dumba and Brodin are not protected. And
Right.
Like, woo! But if they all of a sudden they trade Jason's, we find out Thursday that they trade Jason Zucker to Vegas, then they're not going to lose either Dumba or Brodin.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so it's not going to be.
Some of that will go on. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and some of it's already good.
Rutherford's come out and said that told all 5 of his UFAs to check out the open market. We don't know what we can do. That's the rumor. That's the story from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette today. He said all of the restricted free agents, I met with them all and told them that we're not going to close the door on any of them. He said, but with the cap the way it is, it's tight fitting guys in. We're not going to be able to fit everybody in. So he said, essentially, come back and say, here's what we've got. Can you get to that number? Can you get close to that number? Rutherford said, then they can make the decision. So he's being.
Well, the only guy that I thought they might make, like I felt Benino was gone because he'll do better on the open market.
Right.
And Matt Cullen, I think, will retire. The guy that I wondered whether they would make a little bit of an effort would be Trevor Daley. Because they have to have another puck mover because Letang obviously has been injured and had issues over the last few years. And I think it's, he fits well into that system. They trust him. They like him. And if he's smart. But, Schultz has turned out to be the player that he wasn't in Edmonton. So, I'm very bullish on this Pittsburgh team. I think they're going to be, exceptional again next season. So
it really depends on how they get ravaged by the cap and who they lose. Like, Hainsey's going to go run into Carolina, and that'll be the offer that Rutherford has to match. Like, I'm pretty sure that that's not.
I mean, I thought Hainsey did a really nice job for them, but I don't think they're worried about Hainsey. I think they feel like they can find another guy. I think it's more crucial to get their restricted guys done, get it, organized. And I think this is a very important deal. I think Rutherford is very confident in his ability to find the guys that plug in and create the depth of a roster.
Well, I think Daniel Sprong will be one of those guys. I think he'll lead the team, and that'll help him.
Yeah. He'll take one of those spots. But they have the feel of an old team, but they've got a lot of guys, like Mata and Sherry and Rust and Murray. We forget Murray.
And Gensel.
And Gensel that are young guys. So they can be good. And Malkin and Crosby are still playing at a very high rate, even though they're 29 and 30. So,
Kev, did you get the impression that was it for Kunitz because he's a UFA, and or is that somebody who might come back on a cheaper salary?
Yeah, that's going to be a fascinating one because he's very, very popular. That's a good point. I thought there might be some if he's willing to take less, I think they'd like to bring him back because they know what he can do, and I think they like him in the room. They like what he does in the playoffs. He's got a good playoff history, and if he would be able, but if he needs to be paid, like what he might be able to get on a short-term deal. Because, if you're a contender, wouldn't you want a guy like Kunitz on your roster for a one-year deal?
Yeah, I think Kunitz is going to go back. I think he'll go back.
He's got 4 Stanley Cups. Of course you would.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he'll have to take less to play in Pittsburgh, but he might do that.
I think he will do that. I do.
One of their strengths, too, we haven't talked, obviously, since the Cup, but, man, I how I feel about Babcock. I think he's worth points in the standings every year. Yeah. Well, Sullivan to me is worth points too.
Sure.
No, he's definitely.
I think he is the right coach for this team. I think he has got a great understanding this up. I wrote about this, but I think it bears repeating too. Every once in a while when you're in sports, you hear something that it just kind of strikes you as insightful. And the one thing that Sullivan said, now I've covered the league a long time, and I've never heard this before. Now, it's a simple thing, and of course you're going to go, well, yeah, sure. But I've never heard it put for this. He's repeated it multiple times during these playoffs. And he basically said there is nothing Nothing is more disruptive to defensive coverage than a shot on goal. And now it seems like, well, yeah, sure, but the point of all that is that he basically just said is, look, chaos ensues, and that's why this team does things like that. It banks shots off the pads, and so that the incoming winger. Now, they're not the only team that does that, but I just think that Sullivan sees the game just a little bit different than everyone.
I love that.
I agree. I'll tell you the most important guy on that roster is Tristan Jarry, from the sense that last year, if Fleury isn't there, they don't make it to the Stanley Cup. We all know that. Now, we're all assuming, again, that Matt Murray will have a healthy season, but if he doesn't, that's going to put a lot of pressure on Tristan Jarry, who's never had NHL experience. That's going to be their backup.
Unless they go out and they sign themselves a veteran backup for $700,000 or something like that.
Today, right? Signed a goalie today to an entry level.
Yeah, but he was entry level. It's Philip Gustafson, but he's 19 years old. I mean, but no, I'm talking about like going out and signing Curtis McElhaney or somebody like something like that. A veteran guy.
I don't think they'll give this kid a chance. They like him a lot. So
I'm just saying it's an unknown for a championship team. That's all.
Right. Exactly.
That's fair. For sure.
So it's funny to go back, and someone sent me the list of the Predators expansion team in 1998.
Uh-huh.
I thought this might be fun to look at again because the whole thing is it's really funny when you go through who was on that team, who was taken by that team, and I forget that like Mike Richter was taken by the Predators in the expansion draft.
No, he was not.
It says it on here that he
wasn't. No, they took Mike Dunham.
Right.
Took Mike Dunham, but from the Devils.
Right.
It says on here. I got to look this up. I didn't
Trust me.
Yeah.
Trust me when I tell you, Mike Richter was not taken.
I want to find out why. They're listing the 30 the players, not from all the
while you're looking that up, let me just ask Kevin's opinion on the Phil Housley hire in Buffalo.
Oh, it's terrific. When Phil Housley was a player, I don't think anybody would have guessed. Anybody would have guessed that he was going to be a coach in the NHL. He was a very instinctual player. He didn't seem like one of the students of the game and so forth. But anybody who has talked to Phil years understands that this guy was one of the hottest properties going. And I'll give you an example. At the World Cup, John Tortorella put Housley in charge of the when Phil Housley went out and did his power play presentation, all of the coaches went out and watched. And I talked to Tortorella, and I had just had a little chat, and he said it was just so impressive. Like he's a guy that's really worked at this craft, a lot, and he's really put a lot into it. And now he is a professional coach. This is not a player who sort of just likes the idea of being a coach. He's put effort into it. He knows he's an X's and O's guy. He's a go get to the rink at 8 in the morning and work till closing time type coach. So I think this is going to be a great hire.
Yeah, and he justifiably he was given a lot of credit for working with that Nashville defense, especially this year, the way they sort of came together after trading Weber, after Subban comes in, and how they played in the playoffs. The only problem with Buffalo right now is you've got McCabe, you've got Ristolainen, you've got a rookie in Brendan Gooley who's probably going to make the team. There's a lot of transition and a lot of veterans on that blue line that are moving out or that have underachieved, and it'll test Housley's abilities as a coach to extract as much as he possibly can out of guys like Zach Bogosian, who've been really disappointing in Buffalo the last few years.
All right, here it is, guys. Ready for this?
Okay.
One of the reasons for the shuffle, this is from an article, from the New York Times, is that Poyle chose, on 1998, chose 6 free agents from other teams, including Mike Richter of the Rangers, who can become an unrestricted free agent on July 1st. Should Richter or other free agents sign with other teams, the Predators would have the rights to any compensation. So Richter was snatched up for a brief moment in 1998. This is the New York Times.
Okay. Okay.
I do not remember that.
27th, 1998. He was a free agent, so I'm sure Richter. But they got some kind of compensation because when you look at there's players.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, you just took guys that they weren't really on the team. They just got them for their rights so that they could get a compensation.
Okay.
Well,
That's what it is. Okay, that's different than being on the roster. That's what
these are the players that were selected. Okay, so this is the selections in 1998.
Now I understand.
Yeah, I think you threw us off a little bit. So
yeah, no, it was just that was.
the guys who were on the roster when they started. So,
but I wonder if we're going to see anything like that here. I mean, could we see anything like that here? Like a guy.
No, because it doesn't work the same way anymore.
Right. They changed the rules. But there's some players on here that were very surprising to me, and that was one of them. So anyway,
we know that Nashville has an early window to talk to RFAs who are not qualified and UFAs. But if they took somebody, and I'll just use him as an example, if they took Carl Alzner for their expansion pick, because we realize that Washington is not going to protect Carl Alzner because he's a UFA. The only thing that they would benefit from is they would have his negotiating rights, which they could trade before the 5-day window.
Right.
That's the only benefit to them. But it's not worth it to give up an expansion pick for what, a 4th-round pick just to get an early chance at the guy. So I don't think they're going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Has the rule really changed or not, or is it just that this is just something that you can do? I guess because we talked about when you take a UFA off a team, that is your pick from that team, correct?
Right.
So that's the only player that the Nashville Predators in 1998 took off the Rangers, technically.
Right. But Vegas, I mean, Vegas has no reason other than to get to get compensation because they're going to be able to talk to the UFA anyway. Because they have the early window. So they can talk to Shattenkirk, they can talk to Alzner. If they don't want to go to Vegas, if they pick them, then all they get is 2 or 3 days extra time to own their rights. And that's probably
they did it for some teams where you were getting absolutely nothing because they could protect anybody who was any good.
Right.
And that's why they did it more. Where now, in theory, you're going to get somebody off of everyone's roster.
Right.
If Nate Schmidt is out there for Washington, they're going to take Nate Schmidt over 3 days worth of negotiation for Carl Alzner.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's the case, right? So you're looking at some interesting things. I just thought that there's definitely I mean, what is going to be the strangest deal? Like, what do you think is that we're going to see here? Does anybody have any concept? I mean, so many things. It's so difficult. Like last time I talked to you, Kevin, we looked at each other. You were, first of all, are you feeling better? You looked horrible last time I talked to you. You were
no, I am feeling great actually. But boy, I did 36 hours before the end of the final. I came down with a head cold, and oh my gosh, I was day to day, but I was playing.
You were playing hurt. You looked. I said goodbye to you, and I don't think you remembered me saying goodbye to you. You looked like you were in a haze, like no one's business.
I was. Yeah, I was. I can't even describe how bad I felt trying to get through that final game. And all I could think of was, this is for sure going to go 7 because I'll be miserable. So.
Well, okay, I'll start it off. I think the weirdest deal would be if there's anything to these rumors of Dustin Brown being moved to Vegas, because it would have to include what I term as a bribe from the Kings to Vegas to take a contract with 5 more years at almost $6 million. I mean, we can't dispute that Dustin Brown is a good leader and has been a good player, but that contract is onerous. And that they would have to really give Vegas something to take that contract on.
Yeah, I think that, and that's, are we going to see that? Are we going to see, we've talked about it again before, like there's a lot of these, we talked, the Bobby Ryan rumors have been out there, Dustin Brown, Mark Stahl, rumors were out there that these guys would go with draft picks to Vegas.
I think we're going to see something weird with the future considerations. Like, I just have a feeling like somebody will go in the future considerations and maybe he'll be on the Vegas roster and then he'll retire or something. Like, I think you're probably going to see some player like that decide, you know what, I'm not reporting. Like, I could just
some team will become like a couple buffets at Bellagio's, including in like the.
I'm going to predict that a first-round pick gets dealt as part of the finagling to get Not think. I think maybe more than one, maybe two first round picks get dealt to keep all your bodies safe.
Well,
and the team I wondered most about with that one right now, well, besides these, like we talked about, these maybe dumping a big cap hit like a Bobby Ryan or a Plekanec, but the team I think most about is actually Nashville, in terms of the fact that they are a team that apparently, and rumors I think LeBron said, and I've heard similar things, that they haven't been able to actually make a deal yet to protect Neal or Yoncroft. And they're still in that spot where they're not like Anaheim, where Anaheim's feeling pretty good about themselves. Nashville's still not quite sure.
Well, I don't think they're going to lose one of those. I think they'll be traded. The guy will be traded. But, if you're Vegas, you can't make a deal with every team. You got to leave something to be able to draft,
Yeah, right.
Let me ask you, we may not know what the rule is for this. So let's say there's a team like with a player like a Mike Fisher, right, who you're not sure is retiring, and they leave him unprotected. Vegas selects him, and then the player goes, you know what, I am going to retire. Does Vegas get any compensation, or that's it? They selected a guy and he retired.
No, you take him at you have the same risk as everyone else. So yeah,
at your own peril. I mean, are you talking about taking a UFA? Because Fisher's a UFA.
No, I know. I'm just using the name as an example, not contract. But I'm just thinking there's a player out there somehow that's going to decide that he doesn't want to play for Vegas and he's going to retire.
Yeah, the issue for the Predators is that whichever of those guys they leave available, if they were, would be taken. Because you take Yarncroc because he's $2 million for 5 years and he's a pretty serviceable player. And if you kept him and put Neal out there, you take him because you could trade him.
Right.
He's like just 1 year left at $5 million. So for offense, either you put him on your own roster or you trade him to a team that's desperate to find goal scoring. So
final thing I want to discuss today before we get out of here, it's almost 2:00, is the Radulov situation, which I've heard has been back up and down a little bit lately, and how this could possibly affect what's happening in the expansion draft. I don't know if it can affect it or not, but I heard a couple days ago that Radulov and Montreal were getting a little bit closer, and as is typical, right after you write that, other people write that they're getting further apart, and so I talked to my source again, and he said, well, they're getting. I heard they were getting closer, and then he calls back and says, well, they might be. This is definitely a really. It's not a clean thing that's going on with Radulov and the Canadiens right now. Is all I have to say. There's a lot of back and forth going on, and
basically the reason why it's not going smoothly is everybody knows there are teams out there that would love to have him. So he has options.
He's got options, and now they just picked up Duran. And they gave Duran a lot of money. So Radulov's not going to. It's kind of funny. Radulov's contract will be smaller than Duran's, right? Do we agree with that?
Well, that's why being able to extricate yourself out of the final year of Plekanec's deal might be something that costs them a first round pick, because that's $6 million for just 1 year, but it buys you time. I mean, Radulov is one of their best players last year, but Galchenyuk's an RFA, so he's going to expect to be paid. That's why they may move him. They have Pacioretty under contract. They still have to sign Markov, and he supposedly wants to come back. And Carey Price is 1 year away from free agency. So Bergevin's got a lot of things to move around to fit these guys in.
Yeah. I mean, I think it gets done, but at the end of the day. And I also forgot to mention yesterday that the Flyers had bought a ECHL franchise in Alaska, and they're moving it to Portland, Maine, which is the home of the Maine Mariners, which when I was a kid was the big AHL team where Pelle Lindbergh and such played. And overseeing the day-to-day operations for the Portland, Maine team will be Danny Briere. So he's stepping into we talked about another guy who's stepping into it. This is a perfect fit for him. Danny's a very sharp hockey person, so I'm not surprised at all. This is a good move. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of guys move into this. We really are in an era of Billy Guerin, Briere, a lot of guys moving into more and more management type spots. I mean, Guerin's a lot further along. He's been an assistant GM for quite a while. But so there you have it. That's all the time we got. Kevin, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Have fun in Europe.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We'll talk to you soon.